What's up, guys? Welcome back to Bark Forge. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Bark Forge. Today we are going to be building a new anvil stand for my anvil. Something I've needed to do for a while. I'll show you why. My anvil stand's pretty crap. We're going to be building what I'm going to call the overkill anvil stand. Why is it overkill? Well, the way I chose to put it together is a little complex. Definitely not necessary, but it's an idea that popped into my head. I thought it would be really cool, so I want to try it out. I think it's going to look really good, and hopefully if it looks good, maybe some of you guys will try it out and let me know how it goes. So first we'll take a look at the anvil stand I'm using now. I'll talk about why it's not so great. I'll show you the design I came up with, and we'll start building it. Alright, so here's the anvil stand I'm using right now. All it is a piling cutoff that I got from down the shore. There's a few reasons this really isn't working out for me. First of all, I don't know if you can tell right away from the camera, but it's super crooked. It's crooked both this way and this way, so it's really tilted. So I can really only stand on one side of the anvil right now comfortably, which isn't great. Second off, it's way too skinny. You can see the anvil is hanging over on multiple spots. And third, it's way too tall. So I'm sure most of you know this already, but a blacksmith's anvil, the surface needs to be the correct height off of the ground so that you can comfortably swing your hammer and get the most force out of your blow, not be hunched up like this, hurting your shoulder, hurting your elbow. My anvil is way too tall. So the easiest way to figure out how tall your anvil should be off the ground is just to measure from a standing position, a comfortable standing position, how tall your knuckles in a closed fist are off of the ground. So if you grab a tape measure, hold it on the ground, that measurement right there is where the face of your anvil should be. Now, you can see already that my anvil is way high. And this is the low spot of the anvil. It's even higher up here. So I've already done the math. My closed fist is 31 inches off of the ground, and my anvil is 11 inches tall from the foot all the way to the face. So that means my anvil stand has to be exactly 20 inches, and that should give me a much better and more comfortable anvil height. Now, for anybody that's interested, this anvil is a Peter Wright. It's a 135-pound Peter Wright anvil. I honestly don't know the history behind it. I really wish I did. I was really lucky enough to get this anvil off of a friend of my dad's when I first started getting into blacksmithing. I don't know where he got it. What I do know is that this anvil has certainly spent quite a bit of time outdoors. You can see I got some pretty serious pitting on the face. But overall, it's actually fairly nice and flat. I do have a lot of good working area here. The edges aren't great, and someone ground out the hardy hole for some reason. But I couldn't ask for a better anvil, especially at this stage in my, blacksmithing hobby career. So it's a great anvil. You can't really make the words out anymore. My dad and I did some investigation work to really piece together what that said, but it does say Peter Wright. So love this anvil. Super happy to have come across it. Probably one of the coolest possessions that I have right now. All right, so what's the design? Well, I originally saw some anvil designs online where people kind of were either gluing together or somehow fixing together stacks of lumber to make a larger block, and I thought that looked kind of cool, and I wanted to replicate that. So my original plan was to get a bunch of 4x4s, somehow join them all into like a grid and make, an anvil stand that way. When I went to Home Depot to pick up the lumber, I saw that they had 6x6s, and I said, well, even better, that's less work for me. 6x6 is much bigger, so I'll have less pieces to stick together. It'll be a little more sturdy. And I was trying to figure out how am I going to actually join these, and what came to my mind was, I really like ships, I really like docks and stuff like that, and if you've ever seen a bulkhead on a dock or a waterway, there's these huge bolts that tie back the bulkhead to the whaler, which is a buried beam under the ground. And these huge bolts just have these big nuts, and they drive through the ground, and they hold everything together. I thought it would be really cool to try to use some big threaded rod to hold this stack of lumber together. So we'll go to the computer, I'll show you the design that I made up real quick, and then we're going to start building and see how it goes. Alright guys, so here is the design that I came up with. Super simple. We've got a 3x2 grid of 6x6s. They are all bolted up together with 3/4 10 threaded rod, 3/4 10 nuts on the end with some big washers, and that's it. That's all it is. It's, like I said, for an anvil stand, definitely overkill. But I really like the look. This is what I was going for. And I'm going to try it out and see how it turns out. Hopefully it looks just as good in the final product. Now, you might ask yourself, did you really need to 3D model that? That's pretty simple. No, definitely not. I just did this just so you guys could visualize what I was visualizing in my head. And it did definitely give me a little reassurance that this is probably a good plan, because in my opinion, this thing looks awesome. It's got the exact aesthetic that I like, and it's going to be super durable, no question about that. So that design, it's going to be a little bit of work drilling all the holes, but I'll show you everything I bought, and we will go over what the plan is to put together. I think this is going to be a two-parter because my forge isn't up and running right now because I'm rebuilding the forge, so I really want to make a strap to go over the feet that I can put some more smaller threaded rods in to, hold down the anvil. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that just yet, so that might come in a later episode. So the first thing I bought from Home Depot was two 8-foot 6x6 beams. Now, the reason I went with 8 foot is because when I calculated, I need 20-inch long pieces, that's the height of the anvil stand, and I need 6 total lengths of 6x6 to make the grid that's going to go into the anvil. I'm going to do a 2x3 grid, so each 8-footer is 96 inches long, so I'll be able to get 4 20-inch long 6x6s out of each one. So I'm going to have a bunch left over. I can use that for whatever else, in case I make a mistake. Now, what I'm not sure about right now is when I went to the hardware store to pick up this lumber, they only had pressure-treated lumber. I didn't necessarily want pressure-treated because A, I wasn't worried about it rotting or facing any weather because it's going to be indoors always. And B, I did want to put a charred finish on the outside of the anvil stand. I thought that would look really cool. Now, I know that you're not supposed to burn pressure-treated wood because it'll release chemicals, harmful chemicals, nasty stuff that you can breathe in. I'm not exactly concerned about that because if I'm going to do it, I can do it outside and I'll wear a respirator and everything. But what I don't know is what a charred finish on pressure-treated lumber actually looks like. Because if it looks like crap because of all the chemicals in it, then I'm not gonna pursue it. So maybe I'll do a test piece, see what it looks like. If that doesn't work out good, I can always just stain it a nicer color because pressure-treated lumber kind of has a green tint to it. It's not that pretty. So we'll see how that goes later. The next thing I got was two 6-foot lengths of 3/4 10 threaded rod. Now, by my calculation, this should be exactly enough threaded rod with an overhang of about 1 inch past the face of all those 6x6s to get ten rods through that stack of lumber, because that's how many I have in the design. I could, if I needed to, omit the middle rods, theoretically, from the longer side. Now, my other concern is I wanted to have a blackened finish on the hardware, meaning the rods and the nuts and the washers, and all of this stuff is zinc or nickel coated or whatever this is. So I don't know if the best move would be to just paint these things. Again, my forge isn't really up, so I don't know. I can't exactly do a real blackened finish right now. I might just cook off the zinc coating with a torch and paint them when they're on the anvil, or maybe as I'm installing. I don't know. Again, we'll see how it goes. But if you guys don't know, anything zinc coated or galvanized is going to produce some poisonous fumes if you heat it up too much, i.e. welding on it, forging it, whatever it is. If you breathe too much of that stuff in, you will come down with what's called heavy metal fever, which will make you feel pretty crap for a day or two, and we don't want that. I'm going to try to avoid that if possible. We'll see. Another reason it's an overkill anvil stand is because I did have to spend a good amount of money getting all the hardware for it. I think I spent 2 lengths of 8-foot 6x6. I think they were like 30 bucks each. The lengths of threaded rod, probably like 20 bucks each. The nuts and bolts, another 20 bucks. So for an anvil stand, completely unnecessary. I'm sure a lot of people are going to say, what the hell's wrong with this kid? Why did he spend that much on a freaking stand for his anvil? Again, just an experiment. I thought it would look cool, and that's why I'm trying it out. Hopefully it does look cool. We'll see. All right. And finally, I have all the hardware here. I needed 20 nuts, 20 washers, so this is 20 3/4 by 10 nuts. And finally, the last thing I had to pick up was a 3/4 drill bit. Freaking huge drill bit. I don't think I ever thought I'd be buying a 3/4 drill bit for anything, but here it is, 3/4 drill bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is start cutting these 6x6s down to 20 inches. So there's that end. You can see right here, this square was what was left after the circular saw went through. I did dig in just a little bit with that Sawzall, so I'll have to be more careful next time. But overall, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to do that 5 more times. Alright, so we got our pieces cut out here, all 6 of them. Came out pretty good. Some of them aren't as square as I would like. The Sawzall does kind of chew up the surface, so I don't know if I'd recommend using a Sawzall if you're going to do this. I have my apprentice here making up a jig so that we can center our drill holes on each of these consistently so that they all line up. Although this lumber is inconsistent in general, so I don't know how close it's going to get. We're definitely going to have to plane the surface. Right, so the way this jig here is going to work is, because we need the hole placement to be consistent on all of these so that they line up right, this jig, we're going to take our piece, this is just a scrap piece here. Oh, that's heavy. Oh god. Put our scrap piece in the jig. The jig holds it, just like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to drill holes in the jig at the 2 different heights that we're going to need, so that ultimately what we can do is take this jig, lay it on top of our piece, and just drill right through those holes, and we'll have the same placement every time. Now those heights, we kind of eyeballed it for the most part. We figured that for the rods that are on the top, which are the ones that go across the whole length of 3 6x6s, we're going to put the center of that nut 2 7/8 inches from the top of the 6x6. Now the lower rods, which are the ones that are going this way, because we have to make sure they don't intersect that top rod, that's going to be about 4.5 inches from the top of the stand. So that's why on our jig here, we just sketched it out real quick, but we're going to have 2 holes. 2 7/8 inches, 4.5 inches, and depending on which hole we're making, we're going to use one of the 2. Now we're using a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to get the holes drilled in that jig. Alright, so here's how we have this jig set up. The jig has an A hole and a... Oh, fuck.
Should we change it to 1 and 2?
Yeah, let's do it. The jig has hole A and hole B on the top, hole A and hole B on the bottom, and on the actual stack of 6x6s, I've marked which side we need to drill with holes B and which side we need to drill with holes A. Alright, so we've got all of our holes drilled in these 6x6s. So the next step would be to cut our threaded rod and pull it through those holes. But as I mentioned earlier, I think I want to try to do a blackened finish on the hardware, because I don't want to have a nice darkened wood but then this zinc plated hardware. So what I think I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to try to, see I got all these nuts set up in the forge right now. I think I'm going to use the forge to cook off all the zinc coating. And I can't recommend anyone do this because, as I mentioned, the zinc coating, when it gets heated up, will produce toxic fumes. So I don't recommend that you do this, but I'm doing this outside. I'm going to have a fan on it, and I'm going to stay away from it. And then I think I'm going to leave the hardware maybe in some instant coffee overnight to get a nice blackened finish before I end up putting everything together. And I'll probably do the same to the ends of the threaded rods, so maybe I'll leave them in like a bucket or something. So after a quick wire brush to get all that nasty green stuff off, so we got a raw steel nut. This is exactly what I was hoping for. So now we can blacken these. I've got the washers and one nut that I forgot wired up here, and I'm going to throw them in the forge the same way. Cook off all that coating, cool them down, give them a good wire brush, and then they'll be ready to spend the night in some instant coffee. We got these nuts all cleaned up, wire wheeled, so they're ready to get etched in the black coffee. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to cut the threaded rod, stick the ends of the threaded rod into the forge, do the same process that I did here, and then we can get these blackened overnight. Okay, so what I have here is a coffee can full of instant coffee. This is what I'm using. This is Folgers Classic Decaf Instant Coffee. It has to be decaf and it has to be instant. As far as I know, normal instant coffee will work, but it's not nearly, it won't etch nearly as dark. Someone told me that. Whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. I've never tried. But I know this stuff works great. Here's a blade, for example, that I dunked in it as an experiment. You can see it got nice and black, and that's what I'm hoping to get out of these nuts and washers here. So I'm going to leave these overnight. I'm going to give the threaded rods the same treatment. Hopefully we get a nice finish out of this. I've got the threaded rods over here cooling down. They're nasty and green because we cooked off all the zinc. So once those are nice and cool, I'll wire brush them to be nice and clean like these. Now guys, just so you know, there is an easier and safer way to remove the zinc coating, and that's vinegar. All you have to do is soak zinc-coated steel in vinegar overnight, and it should strip that zinc coating right off. I don't have any vinegar right now, and I'm being a little impatient, and I have a forge, so I figured that way it would be quicker. And I wore a respirator, I had a big fan hooked up and all that, so I'm not too worried about inhaling any of the fumes, but I wouldn't recommend that you guys do it that way. If you're going to do this, just take the extra time, use the vinegar, it'll be safer in the long run. So I mentioned before that I wanted to put a charred finish on the anvil stand, but these pieces of timber here, these are pressure-treated wood. So keeping in mind that it's pressure treated, I knew you're not supposed to burn pressure treated wood. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm not super worried about it because I can do it outside or wear a respirator. But what I am worried about is what it'll actually look like. I don't know how a piece of pressure treated wood is going to react to getting a charred finish. But what I did off camera was took my little MAPP gas torch here and I did a test piece. So here's what we started with. And here is my test piece that I did. And this thing came out awesome. This looks so good. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that it's pressure treated that the wood grain becomes so pronounced like this. But I am super happy with how this looks. There's very little smoke. You know, I was wearing a respirator, but I didn't really notice any harmful fumes or anything coming off of it. So yeah, this looks really good. I'm definitely going to do this to the finished product. This is just my test piece, but I'm super happy with how this happened. So the last thing I have to do now is get these in the decaf coffee overnight. Or I might do a few hours on one end, flip them, do a few hours on the other end. So it won't be fully overnight, but tomorrow morning I'll come back out. We can start bolting this thing up.